I was thinking, what should I do? And then I found this on my.
Чё?
So that's it. Why not?
А что, зум можно? Зум. Чтобы вот эту вот херни не было, либо сюда его глядь к этому сидению.
Блин, а я не увидел, что там эта херня. Of course there will be a stream, but is it sure that there will be a stream? I don't know.
I think that is the reason why we have called software engineers.
Yeah, I was wondering if it's not falling.
Смотри, статус за сегодня только 50% сделан.
Окей.
Сама какой? 21% сделал сегодня. Следующий чувак интересно.
Чего?
You don't know?
Там Linux не написано.
Все, значит, это табу.
Вообще еще 10 минут до начала.
Ну, let's talk about Monero.
Ух ты, смотри. I wonder, will he be playing?
I have no idea.
You know he plays, right?
Oh, does he?
Yeah. Last time it was in Antwerp, a little local conference. That's the name of the conference.
Ah, okay. Okay.
He was talking there about open LDAP, I think. First he played violin a little bit. His photo on the website is also his. Ты фотку назад сделал? Сколько народу?
Уже? Это же криптокурренси здесь вообще, мне кажется, скоро будет на ступеньках сидеть, вот здесь лягут там. Ну нихера себе. Уже нет. Если бы ты раньше предложил, я бы сказал, да. Я уже какого. Чего же он не отправил там мейл? Ты что, он меня обманул, что ли?
Не, может он там,
В обязательно.
ну да, интересуется, с кем-то переписывается, набивает инфу.
Не, он при мне создал мейл, записал уже это, набрал мейл, написал это. Может, не отправил? Ты запомнил, как они называются? Чтоб, если что, я на них вышел, а через него пошел, если мы еще не увидим, как называется.
У меня там открыто. Я скину.
Hello everyone. Compress a little bit. Move on over to each other. You won't bite. Then we have more places for everybody else. So please move towards each other and compress a little bit. Thank you.
Сейчас надо чарты Monero посмотреть.
Блин, что я Monero не купил?
Вот, 15% на сегодня. Сейчас я сделаю скриншот. здесь. Надо 500 евро. О, вот он. Это он, да?
Howard Chu, a talk and a song from inside Monero. He'll play even before the song starts.
Чувак, который будет за Monero говорить, он обычно перед своим выступлением всегда играет на скрипке. Наверное, медитация.
spelling for that has always amused me because it's spelled B-E-E-R-D-A-N-S. So I being in Southern California, that I am not, I would say this was the beer dance, which works in this venue, I think. All right, so my name is Howard Chu. I'm here to tell you today about Monero. I have my own company called Sinus Corporation. We've been around since 1999. I've actually been writing free software since the 1980s. If you were here for Simon Phipps's keynote talking about this is the 20th year of open source, and I've been writing free software since before open source was a thing. Some of the stuff I've done over the course of time. You might have been here when I spoke in FOSDEM a couple of years ago talking about LMDB, the embedded database engine. I've been working on OpenLDAP for close to 20 years now, as Michael reminded me yesterday. I was also working on file systems, network file systems for PCs and for Macs. I worked on speech recognition, various other things. If you are a software developer and you use GNU Make, you have probably been using my parallel make code, which has been around for 27 years. Now, while I've been doing all of these other non-security related things, I do actually have a fairly decent history in security-oriented code. Sometimes creating security and sometimes breaking it. So, I used to work on a project called RTMP dump. How many of you have seen that or used that before? Yeah, so that was a project to reverse engineer Adobe's encryption systems. It was an interesting arms race that eventually got a little tiresome. So we would break one of their schemes and they would introduce a new one, and then a couple weeks later we would break that and they would introduce a new one, and then we would break that and they would introduce a new one. It's like, okay, you guys, have you got the message yet? Anybody can break DRM. So today's topics. First of all, what is Monero? It's a cryptocurrency. Well, what is a cryptocurrency? And then what's special about how Monero works? How does it work? So Monero is a totally private cryptocurrency, even though it's built on a public blockchain. Every transaction on the blockchain is completely opaque. The name Monero comes from the Esperanto language, it just means money, and the project was started in 2014. Now this is a slide from 7 months ago. At that time, the market value of Monero was on a sharp incline, and it was only worth $22 a coin. And then 2 days ago, it was worth $200 a coin. And even that was down from its all-time high, which was close to $500 just a month ago. So it's been an interesting project. It's on a very sharp upward slope. So what are cryptocurrencies in general? Obviously, they're an attempt to create a digital form of money. Most of the cryptocurrencies that exist today are forks of the Bitcoin code that was released in 2009. Now, normally, when we talk about things in the digital realm, they're very easy to copy. So one of the innovations from Bitcoin was the notion of digital scarcity, where you can create a digital asset and prove that it's unique using digital signatures. And as you're sending coins back and forth, creating transactions, these transactions are stored on something called a blockchain, which is a public distributed ledger. So essentially, the blockchain is just a distributed database, right? It is somewhat transaction-oriented, but if you think about it, it's a transaction system with group commit and delayed commits. There's typically a very high commit latency. In Bitcoin, the block time is 10 minutes. So a block is committed on average once every 10 minutes. In Monero, the block time is 2 minutes. Okay, and every block carries a digital hash of its preceding block. And so from the very beginning, you can trace the chain of hashes and prove that every one is authentic. blocks and transactions are transmitted around a peer-to-peer network, and every node in the network participates in the validation, right? So every block that goes by, every transaction that goes by, every node looks at the hashes of these transactions to prove that they are valid. So all of this processing is extremely redundant. You know, every node participating in the network is repeating the same work. But the reason to do this is so that you can verify that there are no bad actors in the network. You know, nobody is handing you bad data because you've proved that it's valid. Now, the actual process of compiling transactions into blocks is called mining. Mining is extremely compute intensive. You know, it generally involves running millions of iterations of hashes. And this is intentional, right? The cost of mining is a security feature, all right? It is, it's a way of deterring someone from attacking the network and trying to forge the data. So the fact that mining costs a lot of CPU resource prevents most actors from being able to invent that data. The mining is somewhat of a race, a competition. So the first miner that generates a valid block gets a reward for creating that block. Race conditions in this process occur very frequently, and that means multiple miners can arrive at a valid block at just about the same time. Right? And depending on network propagation delays, you know, the block chain may think there are multiple valid branches at a point in time. But eventually, one longest chain emerges. Right? So all of the miners will choose which branch they want to follow, and they start adding blocks to that chain, and whichever chain gets to be the longest first becomes the next valid chain. So we get back to cryptocurrency. Let me back up 1 second here. So if you know, blockchains are a massive buzzword in the industry right now, you should be aware that you know, it really is, it's a distributed database. It's not all that fancy, and it's not all that magical, right? It's not the silver bullet that'll solve every computing problem in history. It's nothing like that. Okay, so Bitcoin. First really successful digital currency. It had a couple of missions, right? It was aiming to be a trustless system, permissionless, and completely decentralized system of money. The point to being trustless was to avoid needing to require third parties to participate in every transaction. In the modern banking system that we have today, you are always dealing with trusted third parties. You know, you're always dealing with banks and credit card processors and all these others that you trust with your data to carry your transactions out from from point A to point B. And if you look over the history of where Bitcoin came from, evolving out of 2008, 2009, this was a direct backlash against the global recession, right? Where basically all of the banks in the world proved that you cannot trust them. So to design a system that is inherently trustless made a lot of sense in that context. And the notion of being permissionless, meaning anybody can use the network and nobody can deny you access to the network. This is a fairly significant thing in a lot of situations, but for example, in the US, many states have legalized the use of marijuana. But if you are a company that sells marijuana, you cannot get a bank account. The banks will not deal with you. They consider this an illegitimate business, even though it's completely legal now. So a lot of companies who were dealing with marijuana as dispensaries had to use alternate means of financing and alternate means of conducting business. And one of those alternates would have been cryptocurrency. The point of it is that when you have a centralized system controlling all of your finances, they can deny you access to your finances anytime they want to. Right? And so again, the goal of a system like Bitcoin is to prevent you from being cut off, right? It's to ensure that you maintain your own individual rights. And the point of decentralization is, again, to prevent a single point of control. You know, the banking system, I just read an interesting article today. Again, in the US, Wells Fargo Bank, a very large bank in the US, just had multiple members of its board of directors removed by the Federal Reserve. Okay, so here you see a situation where you believe you are free and independent to do as you wish. You believe private corporations can do as they wish, but in fact, there's a central point of control that you have no influence over that is controlling all of these systems, right? So in a decentralized system, the objective is to make sure that all nodes are equal and nobody has more influence than anybody else. Now the reality is that Bitcoin fails on just about all of these points, right? Bitcoin is not a permissionless system. If you look around at the businesses that have built up around it, many of these businesses actually censor transactions, and they can freeze user accounts for arbitrary reasons. Okay, this is not theoretical. This is happening to lots of users already. In actuality, even though Bitcoin is used all around the world, it's not a decentralized system. Right? The majority of mining power in the Bitcoin network is concentrated in like a handful of companies all located in China. And Bitcoin itself doesn't actually behave like money, okay? There's a huge problem with Bitcoin, which is that whenever you spend Bitcoin, whenever you conduct a transaction, all right, all the contents, not only is all of the contents of that transaction public, but once I buy something from a seller, the seller knows everything about my financial history, and I know everything about the seller's financial